Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. Hong Kong's tourism industry is facing severe challenges with a further fall in visitors from the mainland expected this May Day holiday. In 2015, mainland visitor numbers fell 3% from the previous year to 45.84 million. The drop in overall visitor numbers in the first 2 months of this year compared to 2015 was 13%, although the level for people from the mainland was down a sharper 18%. Local retail sales slumped by a fifth in February from the same month a year before, the worst in 17 years. So what is behind the dramatic fall in tourist numbers? And perhaps more importantly, what can Hong Kong do to turn the situation around? To answer these and other questions, I'm happy to be joined in the Beijing studio by Yi Min, the CEO of MTR China Business, and Robert Gap, Director of the Economist Corporate Network. But first, let's take a look at this background report.
Hong Kong's tourism industry is facing downward pressure. A recent report by the Hong Kong Tourism Office said the total number of organised tourist groups visiting Hong Kong in the first quarter of this year was about 12,000, a nearly 60% fall from the same period last year. Mainland tourists to Hong Kong account for up to 3/4 of visitors. Compared with 2014, those mainland visitors have decreased by 3% year on year to about 45 million. Some analysts say the fall in tourists is largely as a result of the politically motivated Occupy Central movement in 2014. Hong Kong Chief Executive Leung Chun-yin warned 7 million people in Hong Kong would have to pay for the cost of these political and economic consequences, which are caused by a small group of people. The recovery of the tourism industry has been constantly interrupted by tourist-related incidents. Last October, a 53-year-old mainland tourist was beaten to death by 4 men while shopping at a jewellery store in Kowloon. The recovery was further harmed by the Lunar New Year unrest in Mongkok. Meanwhile, a favourable currency exchange rate and visa easing in both South Korea and Japan also contributed to the loss of inbound visitors to Hong Kong. And such a fallout has been extended further up the value chain. Hong Kong officials said that local retail sales slumped 20.6% in February year on year, the worst in 17 years. Hong Kong Disneyland recently confirmed that it would slash up to 100 jobs. Fears over a wave of redundancies in tourism and other related sectors now loom even larger.
Welcome to Dialogue, gentlemen. What do you think are the major reasons behind the severity of the tourism winter in Hong Kong?
Well, there are many reasons. Before I answer your question, let me start talking about why Hong Kong is the best for the tourist choice. Okay, I think first of all, if you fly 4 hours from mainland to the radius outside of China, or the China island, where to go? For instance, you can count Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, and Hong Kong, Macau, right? But the first choice for the tourists, actually, first one, the language, Hong Kong language. Second, culture and food, and the price to buy, quality to buy, and the buying experience, and also other sort of elements. But currently, if you look at these elements, all actually replaced by other reasons. Another reason is also, the tension between two sides currently.
Okay, tensions are rising from, for example, the alleged universal suffrage, Occupy Central movement, as well as quarrels between mainland visitors and the locals in Hong Kong. This May Day holiday will be yet another small golden holiday period for mainlanders. They are making their choice. Hong Kong is, of course, one of the most viable options on the table. However, there will be a sharp drop in the number of mainland visitors. What do you think are the strong factors behind the reluctance of the mainland visitors?
Okay, if you see, I was talking about the advantage of Hong Kong today is declining. First of all, language, because there is an app available. People speaking Chinese, you can use the mobile phone and English shopping guidance, right? The food, the food, international food, is available in Hong Kong, in Shanghai, in Beijing, and Guangzhou. And also buying experience and the quality experience. buying experience including the tension issue, right? If you buy something in Hong Kong, if you feel not good, why I'm going, right? Also, the currency depreciation is also the issue, like Japan and Korea. I can fly to Japan and Korea to buy same thing. Why I'm going to Hong Kong? This is the issue.
And this is one of the, I think, beautiful things, but also complex things about Chinese. It is a multivaried lingual language, meaning the way you speak it. So Cantonese is spoken very differently from Putonghua or Mandarin. And you know, even being Chinese, speaking Chinese, as it were, between say a Hong Kong merchant or store person and a visitor from the mainland, you can have all sorts of issues arise from the way they're communicating, what they're expecting, behaviors. You know, Hong Kong has developed under a very different system until recently from the rest of China. So, I mean, there are all these cultural tensions as well.
Yeah, for sure.
The city which is closest to Hong Kong is Shenzhen, is a
Right.
window on Hong Kong or the other way around. Now, there have been recent changes of travel rules on Shenzhen residents under which their trips to Hong Kong each week will be limited to one visit. Now, why there are such draconian bans for the locals in Shenzhen?
I think government is trying to manage the public issues. For instance, in the past, Hong Kong is targeted as the best to buy area and the quality to buy area. So the day trips for the Shenzhen people and the Guangdong people, they can buy something, the day trip back to Shenzhen or Guangzhou. Okay, but Hong Kong people will say, well, if you buy a lot, I mean medicals and milk powder and things like that. So the local residents hit by the wave of the shopping behavior. So they are not satisfied. And the Chinese government is trying to manage that. The less issue, the travel document. And also the Hong Kong special zone, the governor is trying to say, okay, we try to ban the powder going out of Hong Kong. They find something, I can't remember how much. So you cannot transport the milk powder outside Hong Kong. So the both sides, they try to manage the public issues here.
A lot of Hong Kong people have bought properties in Shenzhen. And do you think this ban on travel rules will reduce their visits from Hong Kong to Shenzhen? I'm not sure. But what do you think of the impact?
Well, there's surely some impact. However, in the long run, I believe it should be like that because there are many residents now working in Hong Kong and living in Shenzhen because of the property price. And also there are a bunch of people, they are working in Shenzhen, living in Hong Kong. However, recently, like the Qiantai, the property price is also higher than Hong Kong. So in future, I believe it will be melting together.
Right. Mr. Yi has said earlier that there has also been a depreciation in the Japanese yen and the Korean won in recent months. So the mainland and the Southeast Asian countries had gained popularity this year thanks to the devaluation of local currencies. Do you think this has also served to divert the attention of mainland visitors? Do you think the Bali Island in Indonesia will benefit enormously?
Well, I don't know if it's going to be Bali or maybe only Bali. I think a lot of regional economies throughout East and Southeast Asia stand to benefit because of this. The Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the US dollar. So anytime the renminbi depreciates, the Hong Kong dollar, by virtue of, if you're comparing this, which is normally the case, to the US dollar, the appreciation or depreciation level, that means Hong Kong goods become more expensive. So indeed, although Japan is also known for being expensive, it's become much cheaper. And of course, because of tariffs and other structural issues with retail here in China, basically any place outside of China tends to be cheaper than what it costs to buy branded goods in China. And now Hong Kong doesn't have the advantages that places like Korea, Japan, and so forth do offer for shoppers.
In June this year, the Water Disneyland in Shanghai will be opened. Do you think this threatens to reduce further the number of mainland tourists to Hong Kong? What do you think of the prospects of having even more fierce competitions between the two cities, Hong Kong and Shanghai?
Well, in future, I think, yes. Because I tell you what, if you look at Beijing, in a couple of years, we will have a Beijing the theme park in the east part of Beijing, Universal Studio. And I also heard from this Bohao forum, there is a big, the U.S. Big group called the Six Flags or something.
Six Flags, yes.
They are going to be landing in Zhejiang province. Okay, so 3 big theme park. Same, what I'm talking about, the 3 or 4 hours flying hours.
Yeah.
This is a big impact.
Yeah, eventually it's the kids and the young parents of those kids who will be the biggest beneficiaries of this.
Another point, just very quickly to make, Shanghai and much of mainland China in these regards wins on scale too. Hong Kong Disneyland, actually its biggest issue isn't so much its location or things about Hong Kong versus the mainland, but it's a small park. It's the smallest of all the parks within the Disneyland network. And theme parks really require scale to be successful. Shanghai's is much larger.
Yes.
Tokyo's is large. So anyway, I think that's going to be one of the biggest factors helping Shanghai. And you're right about the other developments going on. Hong Kong's going to have to think of other ways to be comparatively attractive as these other advantages come to the mainland.
Let's look at the rise of the internet and its impact upon the number of mainland visitors from our inside the territory to Hong Kong. Now, an average of 130 tourists per day, a drastic 60% cut from the 340 tourists the city received daily last year. That's a tremendous, amazing change. There were 9,300 inbound tourists in November last year alone. Some might argue, however, that this is more of a result of a web-savvy mainlanders eligible for the individual visit scheme who are now turning to travel websites to recruit personal guides. I'm not sure what this refers to. The use of APP? And,
yes, I mean, the young generation people, their shopping behavior is very different from the old generation. We're already old, right? And what they can do, they can shopping online. There are APPs available. The e-commerce, we call this cross-border or the overseas shopping. If you use the APP on the mobile phone, you can easily access the shops. Why you have to go to Hong Kong? Secondly, there are another thing here I would like to add. You know how many the so-called bonded warehouse in Shanghai, Shenzhen, and other cities? They have overseas products loaded in the bonded, warehouse. You can buy through the APP, and you can go through the website. You order your products. Why are you going to Hong Kong?
It's a good question. You're watching Dialogue with Mr. Yi Min and Mr. Robert Cap. We're discussing why there is a significant drop in the number of mainland visitors during the May Day holiday golden period this time. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Now, what do you think of the image that Hong Kongers should try to protect and improve because of the stats that we heard from the media reports? Occupy Central movement was a result of the local demand for an amendment to the basic law in the one country of two systems principles. Having said this won't be good for example, the revenue of the local Disneyland in Hong Kong.
Well, as a normal resident, I would say, going to Hong Kong, buying experience, I mean, we need to feel friendly and stable, and also, the whole legal framework. Okay, this is the typical we call the one country two system. But shocking to the mainland people, when we're going to Hong Kong, suddenly realize, well, it's like this.
What about the factor of language? For example, if you can speak perfect Cantonese, or if you can speak very fluent British English, do you think you're going to enjoy more popularity with the locals? I'm not talking about their hypocrisy or snobbishness. However, what do you think of this cultural factor for the locals?
I think it's actually a good point. I mean, it isn't just necessarily an attitude about what a person is communicating with a certain language. It's that comfort level, it's that familiarity, it's that way you express yourself. And I mean, to point out, in Hong Kong, the Cantonese spoken there is even different from the Cantonese spoken on the mainland around Guangdong province. So it really does come down to things, including what you're mentioning with language. How comfortable are you interacting? You mentioned British English. Well, Hong Kong had a much longer period of exposure to British English than Putonghua, Mandarin Chinese. So I think it's a good point. I think that's maybe part of what the mainland visitors should be thinking about. How could I improve my behavior to get along with this new member of Chinese society that they've only been integrated for coming up to 20 years now.
Of course, tourists from the mainland will be able to enjoy guidance from the local tourist guides one way or another in terms of the language. However, ever since the spat that broke out now and then between the two sides, some of the local schools refuse to adopt the Putonghua as a part of the curriculum. Do you think this will be a very serious stuff?
Well, today, majority Hong Kong people speak in Mandarin. However, still, like
Excuse me, you mean they can understand and they can speak Mandarin?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, improvement a lot. Because 20 years ago, if you are in Hong Kong, that's right. But today, if you speak in Mandarin on the street, it will be no problem at all. Younger people speaking Mandarin. But what I'm trying to respond to your point, actually, for both sides, we need to learn, communicate each other, because we do have gaps. For instance, the gaps is for the mainland China people, we need to learn and educate. I'll give you an example. In Hong Kong, the metro system, the elevator system, the speed is higher than mainland. Because in Hong Kong, people just get used to the high-speed elevator system. 30 years.
Because the pace of their life is rapid.
That's right. But in mainland, when you open the metro line, you have to slow down the elevators because people, rarely, get used to the high-speed things. They have to learn how to do it, use it, especially for the second tier of city, not like Beijing. For instance, other cities will open the metro system. So even the metro system, you need to, communicate and learn each other. The language, language issue, yes, we do have.
Hong Kong was a colony of Britain before 1997. It means I went to Britain and I know very well how people behave in London, for example, when they were taking the elevator. You stand to your right side, leaving the other half of the staircase to those in a hurry. But in the mainland, a few of us have developed this clear idea about how to behave properly. And this gradually would cause uneasiness from the locals in Hong Kong.
Because you never see in your life, the metro system is developed, in the last 10 years, 5 years, suddenly, booming today. For second-tier city people or some younger generation, because in their life they never seen the metro before, but suddenly there is a metro available everywhere, right? Then they need to understand the behaviors.
Well, of course, the image of mainland visitors is to blame to a large degree. Let me cite you a few examples to highlight the embarrassment that we have had. Shaking cherry blossom trees in Nanjing to make the petals fall so that they could take photos, and even last February, 2 peacocks at a zoo in Kunming died from a shock after visitors picked them up to pose with them for photos and plucked out their feathers. This is absolutely ridiculous. However, these things did happen in the mainland and captured headlines. Therefore, do you think we should do more through the media, the social media in particular, in educating mainlanders?
Yes, I think we need to do more. I'll give you an example. From metro system, what we do a lot of video training for passengers. One hand, we need to emphasize the safety and the operation at one side. Another side, we need to train people how to use elevators, how do you behave yourself in the metro cars. That's what we should do. And also, I'm sure the cultural side, we need to train people behaviors.
Well, tourism industry only accounts for 5% of the local GDP in Hong Kong, with the trade accounting for most of the local economic growth. However, 1 decade ago, we were talking about a tale of two cities between Beijing and Hong Kong, or between Shanghai and Hong Kong. Today, don't you think Hong Kong is fast losing out in the competition because Singapore is most likely to replace Hong Kong for being the most competitive financial center, and Shanghai is fast catching up with the implementation of so many preferential policies, and particularly a firm political will by authorities in Beijing to catch up in many other ways. In this way, given the surging unemployment rate in Hong Kong and the lack of innovative spirit, because we all know that Hong Kong used to rely on trade and tourism, if not property, for their local development. But these things are missing. Are no longer so important for stimulating the local growth. What do you think of the prospects for Hong Kong? I'm staying away from the issue of tourism, but what do you think of the comprehensive competitiveness of Hong Kong?
Yeah, I like to use the Chinese government recently issued a 13 5-year plan, one keyword, innovation. I think I would use the word fade out. The good time is fading out, right? So why I'm talking about fading out, I have number here. The GDP of Hong Kong, actually 24% is trading. And like you mentioned, the tourism is only 5%. And 16% is financial and services and other professional service. 13%. Okay, my view is, in future, because the good time is fading, the challenges meeting opportunities, I'm sure we need to change. The good time is gone. Okay, but what we should do, don't forget, Hong Kong actually still a very dynamic city. I give you another number. For metro system, our patronage number even increased last year compared to you're talking about the tourism falling down, okay? So what that means Hong Kong still a very energetic city in the Asia, okay? So if you count the professional and management service, lawyers and accountants and the people bilingual skill, they are very good in the region. Counting from that, I believe if you think, challenge, and try to find opportunities, Hong Kong still flying.
We should never ever underestimate the comprehensive competitiveness of Hong Kong, which after all boasts of many advantages in attracting talented professionals from around the world. The issue of tariff and duty in particular will serve as a magnetic field. Now let's look at the other tourist attractions. Because of the depreciation of Japanese yen and the Korean won, do you think our number of visitors from mainland to Taiwan will also drop significantly given the recent campaign success of DPP, which is a pro-secession political force? And do you think politically mainlanders will give a second thought to the idea of visiting Taiwan, which of course is a very popular tourist attraction for mainlanders? It may not be so, I'm afraid, in a subtle way. Do you agree?
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. Mrs. Tsai, who's the new leader in Taiwan, she has been much more pragmatic than former leaders like Chen Shui-bian and Li Denghui, I think, in her attitude towards the mainland, at least what I've seen so far. And I think if you also look at the fact there are so many Taiwan investors here in the mainland, and there's already such a very strong bond, I mean, in some ways even stronger than that between Hong Kong and the mainland, because of course the groups in the government, as it were, or authorities in Taiwan came from the mainland. So that there's this existing bond between even the groups that have a kind of separation. There's also this connection to the mainland that goes beyond what Hong Kong has. So with that in mind, and in mind that there's such economic ties between the two areas, I don't think it would have to become a very negative political climate, like almost vehemently anti-mainland, and like kind of we hate the mainland attitude before I think it would have a big impact.
Young people constitute the bulk of those protesters in either the Occupy Central movement or the Sunflower movement in Taiwan. And therefore, the nasty attitudes towards each other between mainland and these two territories, Hong Kong and Taiwan, will contribute a lot to the negative impact upon the tourism industry in Taiwan and Hong Kong. Do you agree? Having said this, by the end of the day, we have to take a second look at the something like ECFA. ECFA refers to the trade we have with Taiwan, but in Hong Kong we have the closer economic partnership arrangement. It's very close to ECFA in terms of the implications and the employment and so on and so forth. Now, do you think such sort of economic arrangement will help bring the three territories closer in what becomes eventually a big China sphere?
I think, first of all, it's a time to embrace the change, because the change is on the way anyway, right? Even Hong Kong, Taiwan, the younger generation, and also e-commerce and the trading behavior all change. Now is the era we need to embrace the change. The second thing is we need to calibrate the whole globalization process, because this is not just an Asia issue, it's a global issue, and China becoming one very important role in the world. So with the old change, I believe we should think deeply, diving deeply the innovation.
Do you think the very issue of economic prosperity and the sustainability of which will help bring up the number or serve as a catalyst for a rise in the number of mainland tourists, or the other way around? Because we are talking not only just inbound and outbound,
right,
both way in terms of the tourism boom.
I actually think, yeah, your question raises a lot of key points there. I mean, there's one, the general economic prosperity that is increasing on the mainland as well as in Taiwan, and how that is going to bring the two areas, I just think, closer together. I mean, that's kind of economic logic. You know, as people tend to have more money and more to offer, they like to exchange, they like to do, whether it's inbound, outbound tourism or other sorts of trade. And I just think it's going to happen. Now, it could mean that there's sensitivity, maybe there's less areas of certain cultural exchange. The political side could get tense, of course, I'm not denying that. But I actually think what your question alluded to there does paint what the likely future is, and that is you're going to see a lot more people from Taiwan coming here and vice versa. And they're probably going to find, maybe in ways that, getting back to our discussion on Hong Kong, you actually find more linkages occurring naturally. Whereas Hong Kong, it has, you know, it's a one country, two systems, but even with that similar administrative structure, there's this tension that's emerged because it hasn't been, I think, given a chance to naturally express itself. Where you do have that opportunity with Taiwan, as well as in the mainland within context. Anyway, because it's more of a natural, organic process, I think the ties between Taiwan and the mainland will actually be strengthening in the coming years.
Yeah.
So much for this discussion about the tourism industry in Hong Kong during the May Day holiday. I'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.